You're listening to Becoming an Expat, the ultimate threat to the mundane 9-to-5 life. If you want to live life on your terms, in your favorite place, keep listening. Your host is a paramedic turned author, entrepreneur, and international lifestyle expert, Shannon Enett.
All right, thanks for coming back. I am excited to have on the line with me a mom, a wife, and an expat living in Mexico, Katie O'Grady, and she's going to share with us what it's like to pack up a family of 4 and take off on this amazing adventure to a life in Mexico. Katie, how are you doing?
Good morning, Shannon. Wonderful. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking time out of your day. I'm sure it's a hard thing to do for you at times.
Well, as long as the twins are at school, then I've got me time between the hours of 8 and 2, so I'm good.
All right. I'm glad we fit that slot. And, just a fun fact, I'm also a twin, so, congratulations on having an amazing thing.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah, and I think from the pictures, they're boy-girl twins as well. I have a twin brother, so kudos to you.
Well, then you understand the whole twin relationship. And yes, mine are boy-girl twins, and they're both redheads.
And how old are they?
They're 10 years old.
10 years old. Very nice. Good age. High energy, hey?
Oh, yeah. Lots.
Yeah. And you're a blogger. What's the name of your blog?
My blog is Los O'Grady's in Mexico. So it's a little bit of a Spanglish twist there. It's Los, which is the definite article for the in Spanish, Los, and then our last name, O'Grady's in Mexico. So the only Spanish word is the Los. So Los O'Grady's in Mexico.
Awesome. And I noticed on there you're just recently celebrating your 2nd year anniversary in Mexico.
Yes, on November 30th of this year, 2014, we celebrated both my 46th birthday and our 2-year anniversary as permanent residents and full-timers in mainland Mexico.
Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
And I've seen pictures of you. We haven't met in person, and you do not look 46, so congratulations on that as well.
Oh, I'm sending you a big virtual hug. Thank you.
Yeah, Mexico must be treating you guys well.
It is.
Very good. Now tell me about, where you guys are from and how you ended up deciding that you wanted to change.
Absolutely. Well, I'm originally from San Diego. I'm a 4th-generation San Diegan. Our twins were born there. My husband is also from Southern California, but he's from the Ventura County area. Mm-hmm. However, we lived, our married life, 12 years of our married life before we moved here to mainland Mexico. And my husband retired from firefighting a few months before we made the big move, and we'd always had a heart for Mexico. We actually have a small little place down in Baja California on the Sea of Cortez side that we've been traveling to for years, including when I was pregnant with our twins. We would make these nomadic trips down the peninsula, if you will.
So you got them, started early in vitro, I see.
Absolutely. Well, for the first 5 years of their lives, they would say, we have 2 houses, one in San Diego and one in Mexico, because we spent, as a firefighter, Frank could arrange his schedule or do time trades. To where he would have blocks of time off, and we would take off for a couple weeks to a month at a time and just go enjoy ourselves down on the Sea of Cortez side. And I was homeschooling our twins at the time, so we had the flexibility of having these big chunks of time to really explore and relax and decompress from the city life.
Yeah, how did you guys start visiting Baja in the first place?
The place where we have our property is called Bahia de Los Angeles, and the camp where we have our place. And when I tell you place, it's a 30 by 60 piece of sand with a 27-foot trailer on it, which was really an upgrade because before children, Frank and I were dirt camping. So to have a 27-foot trailer is very luxurious, and I was very, very grateful for the addition of that into our family. But Frank actually went to Bahia de Los Angeles on his bachelor trip. Okay. That's how he first discovered it, and he fell in love with it and brought me down shortly after. I fell in love with it, and then we leased a 10-year lease, a little piece of property, put a trailer on it, built a garage, and it became our second home.
That's amazing. During our pre-call chat, we were talking about how we're both from San Diego area and actually pretty close to one another. Did you guys surf in San Diego prior to Mexico life?
Funny you should ask that. My husband is a big surfer, and he would mainly surf the Ocean Beach, Point Loma area, and probably one of the biggest adjustments for us moving where we're currently living in central Mexico, San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, is that my husband is so far away from the surf. So
Yeah.
he's a big surfer. He's not a religious man. He's very spiritual, and he tells me that he finds his God out there on his surfboard.
I gotta tell you, I know exactly what he's talking about. There is a stillness and a peace when you're sitting on the water and you're straddling, your surfboard, and the way you balance when you're sitting up on a surfboard that way, it's like you have to be loose, and every movement of the water below you, you sort of feel through your hips and up. And so it's like a way to be grounded, centered, still, and in the moment, because you're looking at each wave as it comes. You're looking for the next set, which point. It's just, that's the best way I can describe it. It doesn't do it justice, but I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you, Frank.
I absolutely
magical.
get that.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. That was on my bucket list of things to do in our new retired, if you will, which we need to kind of work on a different word. It still at 46 feels funny to me to say that I'm retired, because when we made the big move, I was 44 and Frank was 50. So clearly lots of people's reactions are one of being of shock when I use the word retirement. So I need to find a different word. Enlightenment, transition feels kind of funny too. So anyways, I'll work on that one.
Yeah.
But on my list of things to do when we first moved to the small town of San Pancho Nayarit, which is about an hour north of Puerto Vallarta, is I really wanted to learn how to surf. Jokingly, I used to say, I would be the perfect wife if I learned how to surf. Well,
Right.
Sure enough, I put my big girl panties on, and I took Frank's 9-foot longboard out, and I hired a female instructor, and she took me out there on one of the windiest, choppiest days. I stood up on my first wave, had a ball, never looked back, and for the year and a half that we lived in the jungle, I became, at 44 at the time, a surfer. So when you describe this feeling of being on the board and finding that peace and kind of becoming one with the motion of the ocean,
Yeah.
you get it. I mean, it's very spiritual. It's very peaceful.
It is. And powerful. It's just like the perfect yin yang, because you have to be gentle, you have to use finesse, and yet the power of the ocean is endless. And I don't know, I could go on and on with different rhymes and poems of the ocean. It's clear I love it. And I was raised by the beach. I just love the ocean. My dad taught me how to surf at a younger age, and I've kept it with me through my life. In certain phases I surf more, and then other phases I surf less, depending on what was going on in my life at the time. But I was always happiest when it was a big part of my life,
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to getting a beach trip coming up here soon. Troncones is about 6 hours away from where we're currently living in San Miguel de Allende. And so our twins are going to be on a 3-week Christmas break, and we are definitely going to be taking a trip to the beach. It's been about 8 months, which is the longest either Frank or I or our children have gone being away from the beach. I was born and raised in San Diego. I grew up in La Jolla. My married life, we lived in Ocean Beach. Frank is a big surfer. Our children love the ocean. Our children are water babies. So it was a real big jump of faith for us when we left the jungle to come inland, which I'm sure we'll speak about. And it's incredible here. But if if you could put a colonial charming town right next to the coast,
I
then
know,
perhaps
right? Yeah.
it's like the majority of the colonial charming towns with history are more inland than coastal.
Yeah, it's hard to keep the coast, free from inundation, and I know that there's still pockets of charm, and usually those pockets of charm are much harder to get to and have less infrastructure, and that's why they're still the way they are. So there's definitely trade-offs. But how did you make the decision that you guys wanted to leave your life, in California and head south?
Wow, that's the $1 million question. Well, for many reasons. We knew that Frank's time on the department was limited, not finite, and not infinite. You understand in your own previous line of work that it's a very, sometimes dangerous, risky job with lots of exposures. And Frank could retire at 50. And so he knew very clearly that was when he wanted to pull the plug, per se. And so we started researching initially online behind a computer screen of various options of places for us to first land. And we had even considered Baja California. As a matter of fact, we drove the entire peninsula from San Diego all the way down to the tip to Cabo San Lucas with twins and our large chocolate lab, stopping at various points along the way. We had seriously considered La Paz. But at the end of the day, moving forward, knowing that we were most likely going to be exiting homeschooling and wanted to put our children into a 5-day-a-week, quote, traditional school, if you will, we wanted more options and opportunities. And that's when we started to look at mainland Mexico. And we had considered Mazatlan, and then my husband, Frank, found this wonderful Montessori school in this little town of San Pancho. And it was really the school that first brought us to the area. I'm an educator, but as I mentioned, I took a leave of absence from work to homeschool our twins, Mairead and Liam, because when we looked at the choices that were available to us in the public school system in San Diego, quite frankly, none of them were a fit for us. And as an educator and as a mom, I wanted what was best for my babies, and still do.
Sure.
And where they're at right now, it's, they have an amazing educational opportunity here, but where we were then in San Diego, our choice at that time was to homeschool. So when Frank found this Montessori program, which was very much in alignment with our philosophy of homeschoolers, being child-centered, child-directed, where the arts are still very visible in the program, where there's yoga and there's music and there's capoeira and there's surfing. And we just thought, well, let's go for it. And so we went on a 2-week exploratory trip about 5 months before we moved. So now I'm talking, this is like June of 2012, and we kind of eeny, meeny, miny, mode where we were going to stay, just looked online for a place to stay, and we spent 2 weeks in San Pancho, which has a population of about 2,000 to 3,000 people, depending on whether or not it's low or high season. But it's only an hour away from Puerto Vallarta, so if you have to get your modern conveniences fix, it would only be an hour away.
Sure.
And so we loved what we saw, and we came back to the States, and Frank wrapped it up, what he needed to do, in terms of the retirement path and all the paperwork and whatnot that he had to do with the department. And we began the process of downsizing, gifting, donating, putting in storage, really evaluating what it was that we needed to take forward into our new lives.
Now, what made you decide? I understand that Frank wanted to, retire with the fire department, but that doesn't necessarily mean you guys have to, leave the United States. I know you had already been visiting Mexico as a family for some time. Were you looking to enrich your lives with a different culture, different pace? Like, what about Mexico that made you decide that once he was freed up, that was the move to make?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, like I said, we've always had a heart for Mexico, for the culture, for the people, for the food, for the music. I mean, I'm a retired Spanish teacher. That was my profession in the States. And I think ultimately, the end of the day, Shannon, we wanted and still want our children to know that there is a much bigger world out there than just life in Southern California. Now, clearly, there's parts of living in San Diego that are lovely. But now that we've had the benefit of being able to go back and forth every 6 months or so to visit family, it really stands out to us even more clearly now, how the life that we're living in Mexico is like life in 3D. It's life out loud. It's life in color. It's especially in Mexico, where everything is just so vibrant and colorful and musical and festive, and they honor their traditions and their customs. And Frank and I felt a longing for that, a sense of community far greater than what we had even in our own hometown. San Diego, I could spend months and years and never run into the same people twice, let alone my immediate family members. Whereas these two different communities that we've lived in Mexico, the first one being much smaller than where we are now, we feel such a sense of connection to the people, and not just the expat people. I mean, we didn't pick the places that we moved based on where is there a large concentration of expats. If anything, we picked places based on where we really be fully immersed in the culture. So, it's a very broad-based question, but education was definitely one of our top deciding factors as to why are we going to leave San Diego. I mean, You only have to turn on the 5 o'clock news or read any current print media to unfortunately see the sad sign of times of what's happening in our public school system.
I think a lot of our listeners are going to scratch their heads when they hear, okay, wait, you wanted to take, the education in the U.S. wasn't good enough for you, that you went and homeschooled to provide a superior education. Then in Mexico, you went and put them in public school. That's kind of counterintuitive. I want to hear more about that. Yeah.
Oh, I know. When I'm just talking with people that I meet on the street or at La Biblioteca Pública or here or there, I laugh myself when I say, yeah, we were homeschooling in the States. I'm an educator. I took a leave of absence from work to homeschool our children because, quite frankly, there was not a program or a school, whether it was public, private, Catholic, or whatnot, that was a fit for our kids. And the first time that we ever stuck them into, for all intents and purposes, a traditional model, even though initially it was a Montessori program, was here in Mexico. So yeah, we did not put them in the school system in the States, and they are very happily thriving and feasting and flourishing, my goodness, and the opportunities that they have here. I'd say in large part, let's just start with the prevalence of or lack thereof of arts in the school systems. And I can only speak right now to San Diego. Sure. Unfortunately, because of budget cuts, lots of the arts have been pulled from the school, whether it's music or, whatever it may be that used to be weaved into the integrity of the school day. Lots of parents and children now are having to fill those gaps outside of the school hours, which is putting them getting home at 6, 7 o'clock at night. So education was a big thing for us, and where our kids are at right now. If they were here with me, they would tell you, oh, Shannon, this is the best school we've ever been to. And even though we were homeschooling in the States, we were doing it always in partnership with charter schools. So there was an actual physical campus that they would go to twice a day, but the bulk of the curriculum and their time would be not literally at home, just sitting at home, but out in the community and traveling and libraries and musical events and whatnot. And then jumping forward to the schooling that they've had in Mexico, when we first moved to San Pancho, again, they went to a Montessori school, which was fabulous. Their day was filled with yoga underneath a palapa and music and dance and your core subjects of math and English and everything. It was an immersion school, so everything was taught in Spanish.
That's what I was going to ask next, so okay.
Which, initially was a bit of a tricky adjustment for our kids. With me being a Spanish teacher since they were born, I've always spoken to them in Spanish from diapers on, whether it was just singing them songs or simple commands. And, as you know, San Diego is a very bilingual, bicultural city, being so close to the border. So you have the benefit of hearing Spanish at any point in your day. So it wasn't like when we moved to the jungle and I put them into a 5-day-a-week Montessori school, that was the first time they'd ever heard the language of the country they were in. It was something that they were already accustomed to. But to be doing math and English and science and history, definitely there was an adjustment period and a challenging one. The first couple of days, my daughter came home in tears telling me, can't we please go back to homeschooling? I don't understand a thing my teacher's saying.
It's exhausting for an adult, let alone for a child. And so how long do you think it took before the twins started to comprehend and it was, not overwhelming anymore?
I would say a solid month.
That's pretty quick.
And that's it, because, if you think about it, they were going to the school 5 days a week in an immersion environment. And then when they were leaving school and coming home to play at the soccer field across from their house, they were playing with all local kids. So speaking and playing in Spanish. And what better way to learn anything than via play?
Right.
So they're over there kicking the ball around or boogie boarding or learning how to surf themselves. And the majority of their friends when we were in San Pancho were local children from that region. Yes, there's an expat community as well, but I'd say in that region there was more Spanish-speaking children that they were exposed to than here in San Miguel. And so it really gave them a great opportunity for their first few months in their new country to get a good grasp of the language. And then I continued to use it more and more at home with them. I'm bilingual. My husband, Frank, he's working his darndest to become bilingual himself, just putting himself out there and speaking with the locals and doing some online programs. But really, I'd say it only took them about a month before they started to feel comfortable communicating and studying and feeling successful in Spanish.
Did the kids, the local kids, their friends, take them into the community easily, and adopt them in, or were they like an anomaly? Like, how did that blend?
I mean, I'd say both. There's always that, oh, these are the new kids. And when we first moved to San Pancho, it was mid-school year. So our children began the middle of the third grade. They began in the beginning of December. So they were the new children. They were the fair-skinned, redheaded twins.
Right.
With very different names, hard to pronunciate names. My daughter's name is Mairead. It's a Celtic traditional Irish name, Mairead, and our son's name is Liam, and they'd never met a Mairead or a Liam before, so there was that bridge to cross over of just getting the kiddos to pronunciate Mairead and Liam's names.
Sure.
But the children are so, I would say, inherently loving and warm and accepting, and I think that Mairead and Liam felt very integrated and welcomed and accepted right away.
That's important. That's great. That's great. Sometimes, once you reach a certain age, then kids can be a bit hard. They can be a bit harsh, once you get to that middle school age, and so you just never know, what kind of environment that you're going to be walking into.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that we chose to make the move when we did. Frank could have stayed on longer on the fire department. He could have continued another 10 years, continue to work overtime, continue to make more money, continue to be in the rat race. But we knew that if we didn't make the move when we did, based on our children's age alone, that it would have been a lot more challenging for us to do it later on. Because at the mid part of third grade, we could see that they were really starting to cement friendships with the charter school that we were affiliated with, and understandably crystallize their relationships with family members. And it's not like we were trying to break those ties, but we knew as their parents, hey, if we're going to do this move, if we're going to jump in with 2 feet, if we're going to stand at the edge of that cliff with the bungee jump ropes tied around our ankle and push each other off and go, let's go for it, babe, now is the time to do it. We knew that the timing was a big factor in it. And so I'm glad that we made the move when we did, because you're right. Because middle school, I was a middle school teacher for 12 years in San Diego City schools, and that can be a different experience.
Yeah, it can. And, it's different in every culture, but there's still that phase that we just have to go through to get our independence, and it's often not pretty. So, yeah.
Wow.
Now, you mentioned Frank is learning Spanish every way he can. Are there any online programs or resources that have really helped him that you think would help other people that are trying to learn Spanish to move to a Spanish-speaking country?
That's a great question. And the one program that I personally can stand behind, just because I've seen it myself, and we have it here in our home, Frank purchased the deluxe version of it, is Rosetta Stone. And I don't have any affiliation with them. It's just a program that, as an educator, I stand behind, and I see Frank working through the program on his computer. It's very user-friendly. It's very appropriately leveled. It gives opportunities to speak and interact, and then take what you learn at home and practice it out there on the street with the people, and fall down and laugh at yourself. And he finds, and I witness it as his wife, that he'll step on his toes, he'll stick his foot in his mouth. Sometimes I want to offer him a salt block when he says things that just the translation of it is hilarious. But he's out there and he's doing it, and he's fumbling and learning along the way. But yes, I definitely would, and that's the one that I do recommend when people know that I have a background in teaching Spanish. They say, well,
sure,
what would you recommend? And the only one that I would feel comfortable recommending, that I know, have firsthand experience of, is the Rosetta Stone program.
I agree. I've used that program, and it is great. And I used to know a few other Spanish professors, and they had the same high regards for that program. It's great when you can make games out of learning Spanish and interact with visual and audio and all the different studies that back that program. It is really fun. Do you think that the Spanish has been a big barrier for your husband's adjustment into, because clearly you were already, very language gifted before you, made the move. Do you think Frank had, a few months that were really difficult for him because every need he needs to get met is, dealt with this barrier?
Interestingly enough, no. I know perhaps the expected answer would be a yes to that, but Frank, I think, in large part based on his personality. He's, half Irish, half Italian. He's got the firefighter background. Mm-hmm. He's a gregarious, fun, outgoing, easy to talk to kind of a guy. And I think that people pick up on that energy of his. Mm-hmm. And when he gets out there, he just has an open attitude towards it. He doesn't hesitate to speak because he knows he's not going to have the perfect sentence structure and syntax or verb conjugation. He just does it. So he single-handedly took care of, well, except for, when I needed to be involved with signatures or paper processing, but he took care of our whole immigration process of the nationalizing of our car, our trailer, our boat. And when he was, when you're dealing with these government offices, perhaps there's some bilingual people there, but it's not the norm. And why would they offer to speak to you in English? If you're in their country, you should probably be handling the transaction in Spanish. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, I mean,
that's insane. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for him. Go Frank.
From getting his Mexican driver's license to our Nayarit license plates to now our Guanajuato license plates to registering us here as permanent residents in Guanajuato, he pretty much has handled all of those transactions by himself.
Let's talk about all this paperwork for a minute. I've been reading about the different enforcement of laws and things that have been changing over time. And in Mexico, I'm being told that if you are driving still with foreign plates and you have a permanent residency, you were living in Mexico and you're driving a car with U.S. plates, that the federal government will seize your car and charge you hefty fines, and you could even face jail time. I actually have people who have told me they have a friend that actually served a few days in jail, and I forget the fine. It was really high though. Have you heard about any of this?
That is my understanding. What you just said, I mean, we don't have any firsthand accounts, and we've done everything by the book and then some.
Yeah.
But, some of the forums that I follow or Facebook pages, I do see discussion of this going on, and I would just recommend anybody to make sure that they're staying current with the law and any changes, and to hire a liaison if you need one to help translate the law to you and help facilitate the process. I mean, that's what we did shortly after we had feet on the ground in Nayarit. We contracted with a woman who that's her gig. She's a legal liaison, and she held our hands to take us through the whole paperwork process of becoming permanent residents and giving us advice on how to nationalize our car, because we wanted to avoid any of this type of a situation that you're asking me about. Because spending 1 or 2 nights in jail doesn't sound like very much fun to me.
No, it would be a great story. Maybe, I don't know. You could be locked up abroad. I mean, that's a terrifying story. But basically, the people who are getting in this type of trouble are either just kind of ignorant, or they're avoiding paying taxes and going through the paper trail. Because if you are living in Mexico, obviously you need to have Mexican plates in your car. I mean, that you have to pay the taxes and go through that process. So I don't feel bad for these people. I think this is a process that needs to be taken care of. However, there is a disjunction and misinformation out there, like there is with so many different expat services, where the local police might tell you, oh, no, you're fine, you can drive, it's okay. And then the federal police are the ones who actually impound the car and clearly enforce that because it's a federal law. So the local police don't really, that's not their realm. It's kind of, I relate it to the current U.S. political situation with the medical marijuana. Like in California, and you have a medicinal license and you go to dispensary, everything should be cozy and okay and legal. I mean, everyone has their paperwork. However, the DEA, the federal government's not legal with the federal government. So they go in and they shut down operations and they do their thing. And I kind of feel like it's similar, except for totally less loaded,
right.
With, this quarrel between the two agencies. And you hate to get in that crossfire.
Exactly. When you're dealing with such large agencies, large government agencies, unfortunately, not everybody's on the same page. So I think a lot of it here in Mexico, too, is just kind of luck of the draw. Like, who are you going to get stopped by? What information do they have? How up to date are they with the current law, which might be in the process of being changed?
Right, of course.
you know? So, yeah, but I have heard of incidences and stories as the one that you shared with me, but we do our best to avoid any of those.
I'm sure you do. Now, tell me, how long did it take you from start to finish to get your paperwork for your dog, your immigration, your, residency, like all the paperwork necessary to move your family?
Amazingly fast. And I don't know if, the universe was shining a whole bunch of luck down on the O'Grady's during that process, but people that we have met since we've lived here are shocked on how fast it went for us. People who have said, I've been in this country for X amount of years and I'm still not a permanent resident. And I don't know what their individual circumstances are, but we moved here literally. The children and I arrived at the Puerto Vallarta airport November 30th, 2012. We contracted with this liaison that I referenced shortly after we arrived. We had begun the process when we were still in San Diego, and this was at the same time that the laws were changing. And so we had to open our case, if you will, begin the paperwork at the Mexican consulate in San Diego. And we got Mexican visas and our passports that were good. Well, the visa itself was good for 180 days, but because our ultimate goal was to become permanent residents, we had to notify immigration within our first 30 days in Mexico. So we arrived November 30th. That next week, we contracted with this woman. Her name's Raquel, wonderful, and she is the one that did all the waiting in line at the immigration office and would call us to come to her home to sign papers or hand over documents. And we were very prepared. We had everything apostilled, the birth certificates of the whole family, the marriage license, every document that was required, that needed to be apostilled, we had. And by the time we actually had our permanent residence cards, I'm just even shocked to say it myself, we had our cards like mid-January because, everything closes around the holiday time. So we had contracted with her beginning of December. It took a few weeks of going back and forth with paperwork and signatures. And then the offices closed for a little while. And then we got a call from Raquel like mid-January saying, go to the immigration office, give them your fingerprints, your cards are ready.
Wow.
Now, there's lots more background information to that. We had to show proof of Frank's retirement income and bank statements. And interestingly enough, we even showed my master's degree. I don't know, somehow it seemed to help expedite the process by showing that,
you're educated and you can pay for yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was really pretty seamless for us, it went very smoothly.
Well, I'd love to get that contact information for the people that made that smooth for you, and we can include that in the show notes.
Absolutely, I will get it.
Yeah, that'd be great. That's a great referral.
Well, she was wonderful. She made something that could have been very challenging, frustrating had we tried to do it ourselves. Not just because not the language issue, because with me being bilingual, I could have helped our family out with that, but just the process, and clearly, like in any country of the world, who helps. And I'm sure Raquel knows a lot of the people down in the immigration office because she does this for a lot of people, so her face is very familiar. And the fees really were very reasonable. The immigration fees were higher than Raquel's. Her fees was like $100 for each Frank and I to do the whole processing of his and my permanent resident cards, and then $50 for the kids. It was remarkable. I don't know if
that is remarkable.
Well, yeah, I don't know if those are what her fees are now 2 years later. Maybe she's got a lot more clients, but I'm sure they're very reasonable, whatever they are, because she's a stand-up kind of a lady.
As far as the other fees with immigration, are you talking about application fees or working with an immigration attorney? What are you talking about?
Okay, so her fees were separate from the immigration fees for the processing of our paperwork with Mexico City. I'm just talking about like Raquel as the legal liaison as a completely separate entity from immigration. Those were two separate fees.
So all you paid were your application fees through immigration and all their stamps, those processing fees, and then her professional service fees.
Exactly.
That's you didn't have. There was no third party and service involved.
Nope.
That is amazing. You guys are rock stars. Seriously.
Well, I tell Frank all the time that he really needs, he started his own blog, which is not active right now. It was something like retired firefighter in Mexico, where I told him, I said, honey, you got to put this down. This is such valuable information. And I think I'm gonna push him on that a little bit. Maybe I can have him as like a co-author or something of my blog to include this very valuable. I mean, it's one thing to chronicle the adventures that I'm having on horseback or whatnot, but the nuts and bolts information that would be this that we're talking about of service and of help to other expats that are considering making the move or that are here right now and need that help.
Yeah, I mean, he can always be a guest, a contributor. You can be kind enough to have him as a guest on your blog. Honey.
I'll consider it.
Very good. Very good. Oh my, yeah. The paperwork can be very intimidating to a lot of people, and sometimes people will decide to just not address it and not become a legal resident, and that really stunts a lot of your process. In a life abroad. I think if you can qualify, it's just so much more worthwhile to do everything the right way. Like you guys did.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it just allows you to operate in your new world comfortably, knowing that you've done everything to the book, really, and that you're legit and you're here legally. And, our intentions are not to go back to the States. Frank actually wants to go for his citizenship and potentially our children as well, so that they have university options here. And when I say that we sold, gifted, donated, put the rest in storage, well, last summer we went and cleared out our storage. So we don't even have storage. This is a full-time commitment for us. We're here.
That's great. What things would you recommend now that you've done it? You've gone through storage, you've gone through the move, well, first, actually, let me back up one more step. What did you bring with you? How did you get it here? And then after that, tell me, if you would have had to do it again, what things are most important that need to be here, and what things would you have ditched?
Oh my goodness, what did we bring with us? Way too much stuff. I mean, like you addressed, and believe it was your episode 3 about the importance of downsizing. We downsized even within our life in San Diego. We had several moves in San Diego, and moving is a wonderful opportunity for you to downsize. But when you're preparing to move to another country, you really have to evaluate, okay, is this an essential item that I need to take for practicality purposes? Is it a sentimental item that I just can't part with, or can I leave it in storage? So that whole process was really an evolution and journey in and of itself. Saying goodbye to a lot of our things that we knew we could not fit. And this is the means of transportation, how we got all of our, near and dear earthly belongings. We did not hire a moving company like some people do. And I'm sure there's wonderful companies out there that do that. What we did was we filled to the very top my Isuzu Rodeo and our 14-foot aluminum boat that Frank pulled behind. There's a picture on my blog that is hilarious. We have our twins' organic mattresses, a large television, and bicycles hanging from the edges of Frank's 14-foot aluminum boat. I mean, I'm telling you, like, there could not have fit one more book or one more Lego. It's really a sight to see. I should put that as like, my header image or something on my blog for a while, because it's just remarkable that we got, this life of ours transported from San Diego all the way down to San Pancho. It took Frank 4 days to do the journey. A fellow firefighter brother did the first trip with him, Josh Wilson, and Seamus, our 95-pound chocolate lab, had a very small space right behind Frank. So Frank got, a whole bunch of dog drool on him for the 4-car ride. And we brought our stuff down by car and boat. And then the stuff that we did have in storage, 6 months after we moved to the jungle, Frank did a trip up to the States because part of nationalizing our vehicles, which included the trailer and the boat, means you need to exit the country to release your TIP, your temporary import permit. And so Frank took advantage of, killing two birds with one stone, getting our vehicles nationalized and bringing down one more load of stuff from storage. Don't even ask me what we brought. God knows what. Certainly we didn't need it because I ended up gifting, donating.
Sure.
I mean, really, I would encourage anybody that's considering a short-term or long-term move to go, the simplified route. There's really something to be said, and less is more. Now, in my case, having at the time 8-year-old twins and making a big move like this, it was really important for me as their mom to bring with them the physical creature comforts of their library of books and their Legos. And so there's some things, that we just couldn't part with. And when we were speaking pre-interview, I talked to you about how I left all of my good cooking pots and pans at home. Now, why did I do that? It wasn't because I stopped cooking. It was because I wanted my children to have their creature comforts of their books and their toys and their sentimentals. So, I'd say the simplified route is the best, and you just it's an evolution. Here we are 2 years later, and I'm still downsizing. I mean, we still have a garage full of things, but you know what? We do need those 4 surfboards that are hanging in our garage here in central Mexico, 6 hours away from the beach, and that's an example of something that we can't part with, our surfboards. So, oh boy, that's
So going back, if you had to do it again, which things, not saying you had to give up your twins' comforts, but what things as a mom and someone who is taking care of the house and an expat, what things do you think are really vital to bring across and that were hard to find in Mexico?
Well, I would definitely piggyback on some of the things that you mentioned in I think it was episode 3 of your podcast, where you talked about the importance of bringing comfortable shoes. Shoes have been a really difficult thing for us to find, even now where we are, where I have access to more things that I did in the jungle. But shoes that fit, shoes that are affordable, shoes that you're comfortable with, I would say bring 2 or 3 pairs and then stop. If you are a cook, bring your cooking wear, bring the things that you're comfortable with, because if you're going to replace them here in Mexico, it's likely that they could be two times more expensive or even more. That's been our experience, because we have replaced and added on to our repertoire of things that we have in the kitchen, and they are pretty pricey, as well as electronics. I would suggest bringing the electronics that you need, because things like laptops or iPods or iPhones are more expensive here for sure. And then in terms of like beauty products, if you're on a special diet of any sort, for example, my boys, Liam, my son, and Frank, my husband, both have food allergies, life-threatening ones at those. So when we first came down, and each time we make a trip back to the States, I load up on the dairy-free, the gluten-free, the homeopathics that we need, supplements, stuff like that. I would say bring what bring what you're comfortable with, the products that you use, because those have been a little bit harder for me to find here too. Supplements or vitamins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as well, our son is an asthmatic. So before we came, I went to the doctors and I explained that we were making this full move, and if they could please write an exception letter to where I could get, whatever it might have been, double, triple, quadruple the amount of his asthma meds, to have that approved by our insurance company at the time, that I could get massive amounts of it to bring with me, because I didn't know what my access to his medications were going to be. I mean, I've since figured it out here, but for those first 6 months when you're learning to navigate a new system, you want to make sure you have ample supply of your homeopathics, your meds, your special foods, your cooking wear, your electronics, your shoes.
Absolutely. You got to walk a mile, right? Yeah. Now, before we get into like the healthcare stuff, I want to ask you, back when we're talking about loading up this car that has just, packed to the brim and outside, like hanging, I want to know what Frank felt and what he went through when he's approaching the border. Because I would have been sweating bullets, to not know what they're going to do, how bad they're going to hassle, if he's going to have to unpack the whole thing, and, if they treated his move a tax appropriately, tell me about that experience.
Well, there was 2 different times. So the first time was when he drove down shortly before the kids and I flew down. This was, September, October. So he would have left sometime towards the end of November, because the children and I arrived on the plane. So he left, November 26th. Mm-hmm. So on that trip, when he had the boat and the car filled to the brim, he shared with me that, this is one of those luck of the draw thing. The border agent was this lovely woman who chatted with Frank about why he was moving and who he was moving with. And if Frank got out the pictures of our redheaded twins, and they enjoyed conversation for about 5 or 10 minutes. She did not require that he empty the vehicle nor the boat, which she could have. Mm-hmm. She asked Frank what he was bringing. He spoke to whatever we had. She could see that we certainly had lots of stuff. And she just did this quick in the air assessment and assessed him like a 300 and something peso fee, which was way less than she could have assessed him, and sent him on his merry way. I'm sure he was wiping the sweat from his brow once he, officially crossed into Mexico. But that first crossing went very smooth. The second crossing involved the nationalizing of our car. And so part of that requirement involved having the car and the boat completely empty. Mm-hmm. Now, on this second trip that Frank made, things were equally loaded. We had too much stuff, I will tell mm-hmm. you, a tremendous amount of stuff that we brought down on bikes and surfboards and tools, and some things needed, some things not needed, some things could have been replaced. So still a very big, heavy load. And Frank did, with the help of some men that were gracious enough to offer their services for a fee, helped Frank unload everything, because in the nationalizing of the car and the boat, he had to drive them each through separate and independent to these certain checkpoints. Mm-hmm. And so we had to leave all of our stuff in a parking lot, just watched by these 2 men that had helped Frank. And that experience for Frank was a little bit more tricky. And when the fee was assessed for that one, again, there's only a certain allotment, like for example, 5 toys per kid. Mm-hmm. And I don't know off the top of my head, I'd have to look at the list, so many electronics per family, there's a formula. Yeah. Well, I think we probably exceeded that formula. Mm-hmm. However, again, on this second trip, it was like this arbitrary 300 something peso fee. Huh. So when we could have been charged a lot more, and I don't know, if it's just what agent you're dealing with that day, or they don't want to actually go in and calculate down to the last peso the exact calculation based on what you have. Mm-hmm. Who knows? But
so tell the listeners how much that is in US dollars.
Okay, so, right now the peso is really strong. I usually do like a 10-to-1 conversion I'm not a math teacher, so I just kind of do like a quick 10-to-1, but right now the peso is about 14-to-1. So let's say it was 350 pesos per trip. Mm-hmm. That would be $28 maybe.
Great.
Depending on the exchange rate, around $28.
Yeah, not too bad. That's like, to pay in tax on maybe one of those items in the U.S., like to buy it initially, Well,
absolutely. When I have things sent to our mail service that we have here, I made the mistake of ordering our twins some posters through Amazon. So the posters were one price. They were affordable and reasonable, but my goodness, the 17% import tax that is assessed on any goods that you have brought into the country can be outrageous. And never again will I order my children posters through Amazon. I'll have Grammy bring them.
Yeah.
Because the fee on the little poster roll or doodads that they put them in, I think I ended up paying like $50 in fees for $20 worth of posters.
It's just nuts, how that works out. So you have a mail service set up for your mail. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's a service in town called Solutions, and we can get, regular mail and magazines, and those are included in the fee of the service, which I don't know right now off the top of my head. I'd have to ask Frank on that one. But any type of a package, a large envelope that might have clothes in it, or a box that would have, for example, my mom sent Liam a refurbished computer, and they assess the 17% tax based on the item itself, I believe, and in addition, the weight of the item. So, it can get pretty costly, but for things like Frank's surfer journals that he still gets, I know, here in Central Mexico, he's maintained his surfer journal membership subscription.
Frank, go digital, Frank, go digital.
No, he's got like every one from I don't know how many years ago, and it's his prize collection, and so he's still getting them here and the Central Highlands, Desert Highlands of Mexico.
Wow.
Now there is, there's regular Mexican mail, if you will, but word on the street is that a letter sent through the Mexican post office can take anywhere from 3 weeks to a month or even longer. So we just prefer to go with one of these private companies for, just to make sure that we're getting what we think we're going to be getting.
Yeah, and do they have a U.S. address, based in Florida or somewhere?
It's based in Laredo, Texas.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like U.S. Global Mail Solutions. They've done really well, and I've talked to their customers, and they're very affordable. So that's one I recommend in our Expat Guidebook series. But there's so many of them out there, and if you need to be based in a certain state, that's important to consider for tax purposes and what have you. But yeah, great. So I'm glad that that's working out for you. I know there's a lot of things like that. People, realize after they either arrive somewhere or when they're getting ready, we're like, wait, what do we do with our mail? And how do I get my credit card? If I need to there's just lots of logistic questions that people have. So much
so. It's the fine tuning of that it's with the feet on the ground that you just figure it out. But definitely resourcing with other people certainly can cut down the time that it takes to figure something out. But you're right, something as simple as mail. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm in this little jungle town, population 2,000-3,000. There is no post office here. How do I get my kids' birthday cards to them?
Right.
So, yeah.
So tell me about bringing your dog over. How hard was it to get all the paperwork or figure out the paperwork needed?
It wasn't hard at all. He just needed to have an updated rabies shot, his health certificate there's a certain amount of days that you have to have the health certificate processed before you actually cross the border. I can't remember if it was 15 days or 30, but anybody's local vet could provide that information. So we just needed to make sure that he was current on his rabies is the big thing that they're looking for. And then obviously for our personal care of our animal, we make sure he's updated on his boosters. And once you get to your landing place, definitely check with the local vet to see what the local bugs are, if you will, whether that may be fleas, ticks, heartworm, etc. But it wasn't difficult at all. It was just, just make sure he was current in his rabies and the health certificate. But quite honestly, I don't even think that we were ever even asked for his health certificate. Better to have it and not be asked than to not have it. So.
Yeah, and I think going through the airline is much stricter than what you did. And I think it also varies a lot depending on what official, meets you.
For sure. I'm sure it would have been different through the airline, but since he's gone both times via automobile, it's been, I don't even think Frank's been asked once for his health certificate.
Yeah, that's a great experience for you. We talk about all the required documents and, procedure in the book, Becoming an Expat Mexico, which is going to be released here soon, right before Christmas. However, it's great to hear as many stories as we can of actually how it plays out in real life. Because as you know, the written word and how it plays out on the street, especially in Latin America, are two different beasts.
Absolutely. And everybody's going to have their own experience and their own story. I mean, let's face it. not everybody's story is going to be the same, and just because it's a rule doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be enforced. And
Right.
that was our experience with the fees that were assessed when we brought over all of our goodies. And
we make no promises.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
But better to have it all in place and not need it than not have it all in place and be asked for it.
Exactly. Now, you speak fluent Spanish, but for all of those that don't, say the name of the town that you're living in very slowly.
That we're currently in, it's San Miguel de Allende, and it's in the state of Guanajuato.
Okay. Now, also, if you wouldn't mind, I would love for you to share the difference between mainland Mexico, because you hear that word a lot, and I think for people who don't know much about Mexico, they don't know what that means. And then also, if you could describe, kind of like you were reading a book, a narrative about what your town is like, what it feels like, what it smells like, just describe your town. That would be great.
Oh my goodness. So your question relative to mainland Mexico, I reference it as being mainland Mexico separate from Baja California. Mm-hmm. So Baja California, the peninsula that juts out, if we were to be looking at a map right now, south of San Diego, going all the way down to Cabo San Lucas, which is pretty popular and well known, but it's a name, Cabo San Lucas. But mainland Mexico for us has been a completely different experience and a very different Mexico. I might jump around here a little bit, but
that's fine.
Speaking specific, I know it's so hard to summarize all this. 2 years of my life and one.
Yeah, just one nice, beautiful, poetic word. Go.
Yeah, just read my blog, will ya? Oh goodness,
Yeah.
Where we're living right now is fabulous. And one of the reasons that we left the jungles was that we wanted to experience a little bit more of the traditional Mexico, if you will. Where we were in San Pancho is very surfer, beach, tourist-oriented community, which is great and wonderful, and it served its purpose and its time for the year and a half that we were there. But we realized that we wanted more cultural and educational opportunities for our children, so we started looking at some larger town/cities. I always vacillate between whether or not I reference San Miguel de Allende as a city or a town, because it's certainly larger than San Pancho. Population in San Pancho, 3,000. Population here in San Miguel de Allende proper is about 115,000. So clearly a lot larger, but coming from where I come from San Diego, where the population's 3 million or so, I still feel like we are in a town. And when you're walking around on foot on these cobblestone streets, there's nothing city about it. It's charming, it's colonial. The buildings have maintained their historical, cultural, and history. There's actually government ordinances that require the town center to honor, the colonial charm to the buildings, if you will. No 2 days are alike here. Weather-wise, it's fabulous. It's cool in the mornings and evening. It warms up to about 70 in the afternoon. That's been a nice change for us. As you know, living in the jungle where it's tropical and warm and humid, with that comes lots of mold, and sometimes the heat can be challenging. And with the heat and the tropical environment, there's lots of different bugs and critters, which can be entertaining and terrifying at times.
You said that, and I just remembered going to the restroom and seeing a tarantula rock across the floor by my feet.
Oh my gosh. I remember the first time I saw flying cockroaches the size of a bat inside our jungle home, and the scorpions, and it was just like, when the rainy season came, all those dormant bugs that had been in hiding, they really provided quite the show for me.
and when you say you have crabs, you're not talking about it in STD.
Exactly. Oh yeah, all the jungle crabs.
Yeah, they come up in the drain in the shower, and you're like, oh, hello.
And the centipedes and the baby boa constrictor that was in our garden in the jungle. That was a real treat too. I'm glad our dog didn't get into that one.
Yeah, so the moral of the story of this little sidetrack is the jungle is not for the fearless.
No, not at all. No, I know when my mom came to visit for the first time when we were in the jungle, I had to forewarn her because she's a little bit squeamish when it comes to anything that's larger than an ant. So I was really on the lookout for those couple weeks that she was with us, because I knew that she would just lose it if she saw one of the flying cockroaches, because, well, let's face it, who wants to see a cockroach that's the size of a bat flying in your house?
Yeah,
So,
I had a bat flying in my house once, and my wife is terrified of bats, and so she just hid in a corner with a towel over her head.
what
And
a winner. A bat's place is outside, not in.
I know, it was doing laps, it was doing circles in our living room. It was hilarious, and so I just kept clapping. And then locking the door to each room. It didn't like the claps. And so it would go out, and then I closed that room until I had it isolated into the living room. And I just kept clapping until it went out the front door. And so that worked for me. I don't know if it's actually a thing or not, but
yeah, seriously, add that to one of your guidebooks. If a bat comes
Right?
to your house, just start clapping and see it.
I know.
Work.
I need more street tests. So if you guys have a bat, you listeners, let me know if it works so I can so I can make sure that this is a legit thing to share.
Well, I will say that that's been one of the many benefits or pluses of us moving to a drier climate is that there's not as many of those colorful creatures. I mean, quite frankly, I'm fine with them being outside and me being inside. So, along with the cool mornings and the dry sunny afternoons, there's been a reduction in critter surprises in our new life here in colonial central Mexico. So, to get back to what does life look like for us here, well, we've gone from surfing to horseback riding. We've got some great friends, Eric and Holly, that own a ranch about half hour outside of San Miguel de Allende proper, and we go riding out there on weekends. We go cruising around on their quads. They've got 4 rescue burros on their property, which are a big hit with my kids, and chickens and dogs and 6 horses, and we go trail riding. And I've had the amazing fortune of doing recently 2 of the Blessing of the Horses rides with thousands of local cowboys. My friend who owns these horses, Holly, and I have done 2 recent back-to-back rides. So definitely that's a highlight of my life here, is getting back into horseback riding, which is something that I did as a kid, and I never would have known that here in my it's weird. I just turned 46. Am I supposed to say my late 40s? Am I still in my mid 40s?
You're mid. You're good. You're mid.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
So here I am in my mid 40s. I went from learning how to surf in the jungle, and now I'm back to my horseback riding days. And our kids are, like I said, feasting and flourishing. They're at a wonderful school. So again, to not be homeschooling anymore has opened up a whole new world for both me and Frank. We get to rediscover ourselves as individuals and as a married couple, in addition to and outside of being parents, because our kids now have their gig, and happily so. I know that they're in a safe place. They're in an academically strong place with nurturing, warm, caring teachers. And so a typical day for me, I drop them off at school, I go take a yoga class, and then I spend my day walking around town, just being in the moment, enjoying the colors. I mean, it's so beautiful here, especially right now at Christmas time, where the buildings are getting decorated, and in our at the what was considered our town square, our town plaza, it's called El Jardín, and it's right next to the parroquia, which is the big 18th century Gothic-looking church here, and they've got a larger than life Christmas tree, and the jardín is decorated with poinsettias and all sorts of. This is our first time here in central Mexico for Christmas, so it's interesting to see how the town's getting decorated. But things are just going really well here for us. And I mentioned to you that Frank has started a second career as a solar installer, so that's been a new deal for us as a family, is having Frank go back to work, but it's with something that he absolutely loves. He and his business partner Eric right now are working on about 4 different projects, with more people waiting in line for their turn, because you know how word of mouth happens. One neighbor tells another neighbor tells another neighbor, and they do great work. And so Frank is happily working away right now as we're speaking. And his ultimate goal with that is to travel Latin America with us as a family, to buy a truck with a big camper shell and do solar installation at rural schools while I blog about it, and our kids get to experience that. So
that's amazing. What a great goal to have, because as you know, electricity is expensive in Latin America, and then a lot of the poor have very inconsistent access to electricity. And I just think that's a great program that he's doing. What's the name of his company?
Eclipse Solar.
Now, does he have a website?
They do.
EclipseSolar.com or?
Solar, yep, I believe so. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if it's a .com. I guess I should have had one of his business cards out in front of me here.
That's okay. We'll put it in the show notes as well. You can follow up and find out that out. And then as far as his installations, does he do private installations in homes or?
Now they're doing private installations in homes, but Frank's ultimate goal with this, ultimate not being too far off in the distant, is for us as a family to travel throughout Mexico and possibly other countries and do installation in the rural schools while I document it via my blog with pictures and, chronicling what the process has been for him and what our adventures are relative to him doing solar installation at schools. So
that's phenomenal. That's really great.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's amazing that, here I've gone from being a middle school teacher to now a blogger, writer, author, and Frank from firefighter to solar installer.
Yeah, you guys are really well-rounded people. Running out of time, but I don't want to stop talking to you because I'm having a blast. But it's a podcast, so let's just go over. I have one more question for you. I want to know about, you've had recent exposure to healthcare, and whatever you're comfortable with sharing. How has that experience been with the healthcare system in Mexico, and how have you tackled your needs there?
Absolutely. So when we left the States, we gave up our stateside health care, which we had through my employment as a teacher through San Diego City Schools. But as part of my fully retiring, I had to say goodbye to that coverage. So here as permanent residents, we qualify for Seguro Popular, which we are active members of. And we have Seguro Popular kind of as our emergency insurance. So heaven forbid one of my children breaks their arm, I can call an ambulance and have them transported to the Hospital General, the general hospital here. But for things like if I need to take my son to the pediatrician for an asthma flare-up, or recently my husband had a health challenge where we might not have wanted to go through the system because sometimes that involves long lines, depending on what your situation is. So let's say it's a situation that you're not transported by an ambulance to the general hospital. If you're able to walk on your own, essentially, and it's not an emergency, you first need to present yourself at the local health clinic, and you are assigned a doctor based on the colonia that you live in. And based on the day's wait, it could be anywhere from an hour up to 5 hours. So that is one option for us. That's going through Seguro Popular. So if it was a situation that was beyond our financial capacity or means to take care of it with private doctors, certainly we would go through Seguro Popular and go through the system, and we're very grateful to have it and to have qualified for it. Now, for things like pediatrician visits or an eye visit or the recent situation that my husband had, we use private doctors who have been very accessible, very affordable, incredibly competent care. Just past week, I've had 2 different doctors making house visits for my husband. They show up on time. They're highly trained. Their credentials are top notch. One of the doctors that's been treating my husband is Stanford trained. He has his training both in the States and in Mexico. So not for lack of competence that,
So you have a Stanford trained doctor coming and doing house visits affordably.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm comfortable telling, your listeners and you how much a house visit costs. So since Monday of last week, I have had this Stanford trained doctor who's a Mexican national, but he trained in the States and trained in Mexico. So he's got both trainings, if you will. And so he'll show up at the agreed upon time, spend as much time as needed with my husband. He's tended to his needs and sits down and talks and smokes and jokes, and not literally smokes, but has conversation and is not looking at his watch. He doesn't only have 15 minutes per patient. I mean, he spends at least an hour each time he comes, has monitored, the care, the meds and whatnot. And each house visit has been 600 pesos. So with today's exchange rate, it's probably, without doing it on a calculator, it's about $50 to have a private doctor come to our home treat my husband. And my husband, I'm happy to report, is on the mend and he's doing great. And I'm sure our needs for the doctor will be lessening here as the days go on. But that's a perfect example of the accessibility and affordability of using a private doctor. When shortly after we moved here, both of my children came down with a viral illness and I needed to take them to the pediatrician. So there's a hospital here called Tech Cien, and I went on to the San Miguel Yahoo Civil List group, which is a resource here for expats, and did a search on pediatricians that were recommended, called the doctor's office, was able to get in that same morning. The pediatrician did a thorough assessment on both of my children. I was completely in agreement with the protocol that he employed. He was very conservative yet appropriate. He didn't want to immediately give them antibiotics. He listened to their health history. And the consultation fee for an hour consult on each of my kids, the consultation fee for each child for an MD pediatrician was 300 pesos.
Oh my gosh.
So again, with today's exchange rate, it'd be like $25 maybe.
Oh my God. That's phenomenal. I mean, talk about a commercial right there, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It's not like we get anything out of having more people move to Mexico or the country of their choice, but, knowing that people are going to be happier and bettering their lives and having a more fulfilling, ability to live in the now in an affordable way and still have your golden years and all the different phases we're supposed to go through. It's just, that's the reason why I do what I do. And it's just exciting to hear people like you who have already made the right choices for your family, and you're thriving. And it's just great to hear.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Well, that's phenomenal. I'm so happy about everything that's going on in your life, and it's great meeting you. And, actually, I never shared how we our paths crossed. I put out a sort of a contest looking for the right picture for the background of the cover of the Becoming an Expat guidebook in Mexico, or to cover the Mexico edition. And Katie, through her blog, she had so many phenomenal pictures, and one of hers was selected as the cover of the book. So it's colorful. It basically describes everything that she said Mexico is. I really think is in that picture. I love it. Katie, thank you so much for sharing all of this time. I know I took a whole lot of it from you today, and
no, it's been great talking. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you again. And for those listening, we're going to have show notes about this interview, and all those links that we were discussing during the talk here will be available on those show notes. So thank you for your time and listening. I hope you learned something.
You've been listening to Becoming an Expat. We'd like to hear from you. Email us your questions and share your stories about taking the leap into your new life abroad.
Tired of cold weather and the hustle and bustle of life? Wouldn't it be great to live in a warm country with a simpler life? Well, it is possible, and you can with the help of Becoming an Expat. Get the book that gives all the details you need to know how to move to and live in countries like Costa Rica, Thailand, Mexico, and even more. This is not one of those books put out by real estate or tourism companies. This is the real deal for a real life for where you want to live. Go to www.becominganexpat.com right now to get your book, or visit amazon.com. Becoming an Expat. Get started with your new life.